So, a landmark Supreme Court order in May this year declared the right to trauma care, timely right to trauma care, as a fundamental right that is enforceable now. And joining us on DeKoder is Piyush Tewari, who is the founder and CEO of SaveLIFE Foundation, the petitioner in this particular case. First of all, congratulations on this huge victory in the Supreme Court and for getting us this kind of an order. Uh, Even just for the sake of our viewers, just to kind of give the big picture, figures seem to suggest that about 4.67 lakh people die in accidents every year, and out of them, road accidents alone comprise 1.77 lakh. And multiple reports, both the Law Commission as well as the Niti Aayog AWIMS report, seem to suggest that 30% to 50% of these lives, which means more than 50,000 lives every year, could have been saved if there had been timely medical emergency care. This particular order of yours, it says from what was earlier a policy aspiration, it's now become a constitutional right. In terms of what the state needs to do and in terms of what the people can expect, what changes?
Well, thank you so much, Uma, for having me on the program and for covering this very important issue. When we talk about trauma care, most people often end up thinking about either ambulances or hospitals. But the question that one has to ask is, how do you access the ambulance? What about the quality of the care that arrives in the ambulance? What happens during transfer? Is it just a taxi service, or is it actually providing you life-saving care? And then eventually, what happens in the facility where you are taken? And oftentimes, what we saw is that this entire chain, what we call the chain of survival, that begins at the point of injury and ends at the point of decisive care, was broken in multiple parts. So even where ambulances existed, they were oftentimes not invoked because people were not aware of what the correct number to call is, because there are so many emergency numbers that exist in our country. Similarly, the ambulances might exist, but the staff and the equipment in those ambulances were found to be wanting on many occasions. So that while there are standards that have been set, they were hardly being followed. Nobody spoke about extrication. If an injured person has to be extricated from a train wreck or from a car crash or from an electric accident, how does extrication happen? Safely. It's not the ambulance guys who do extrication. They are the ones who transfer and who provide care. So there was a lot of gap in this, and nobody had thoughts about the nuts and bolts of this. We were just saying ambulances and hospitals. But what happened before, in between, and after was not being spoken about. And so what we went to the Supreme Court with is that, look, there are a lot of these things that already exist. Numbers exist, ambulances exist, paramedics exist, Good Samaritan law exists, hospitals exist, but they're all disconnected. And so we have to reimagine the system from the eyes of an injured person and what they require at that point of time. And I think that's really what we went to the court with, and we broke the entire chain into 8 or 9 different aspects, and that's what the court adjudicated on. And we were quite happy that the Attorney General of India and the Government of India supported many of the asks that we had. And now there is a binding order on all states and union territories of India to go ahead and implement this judgment within a time-bound in a time-bound manner and report back to the court. So the case has not been disposed of yet. It is still very much live and is being reviewed by the court, every 3 months.
Like you mentioned, the most visible aspect of this may be those numbers that we talk about. We've always talked about 100 as the number for a police, and then for a fire service, something else, 102 ambulance. And in the south, Andhra Pradesh or Tamil Nadu, you speak about 108. With all these numbers now coming together in a unified number, that of course will become a big advantage because it will be universally known. But doesn't that, in a sense, in states like, say, Tamil Nadu or Telangana, where a 108 is very popular, to be able to re-messaging is also going to be a problem, or is there a bigger gain in having a unified number?
Anywhere in the world, and India has an aspiration to be a developed country by 2047. And if you look at any developed country, you don't see multiple numbers. You see what is called a universal access number. And the idea is that even a 4-year-old should be able to remember what number to call for help. And today, if depending upon where you are in the country, you have to dial a different number. If we are one country, then there should be one number. So, and you spoke about 108. Now, 108 might arrive in Tamil Nadu on time, but if the bus is on fire, you still have to call the fire services. So, will you dial a different number for that now? And then what about law and order? Where in many cases you have public backlash that is happening in many of these situations. How do you enable that? So the idea is that there has to be an integrated setup, and the integrated setup will then look at emergencies and injury as a medical and a life-saving concept, and not merely try and determine whether there is a law and order issue, fire issue, health issue, and then accordingly, one has to remember what number to call. And the good thing is that the government had already recognized this. So many years ago, 112 was issued by the Home Ministry as a universal access number, and many of the states moved their 100 services to 112, but they are yet to connect their fire and medical services to that 112 number, making it the universal access number. So the idea really is, the bigger game is that a 4-year-old should be able to remember what number to call anywhere in the country, and they should be able to get help in a time bound period of time without delay, because now it's a fundamental right. And you can't now say that it's not available or wasn't called and so on and so forth.
So what you're talking about is technical and operationally unifying all these kind of services. And for the benefit of our viewers, we must point out we are talking not just about road accident victims, but it could be a fall, it could be a fire, it could be a riot situation, it could be industrial accident. Explain to us the scope of what we are talking about, because this is more than just road accidents. The road accidents itself is quite a huge unaddressed epidemic in the country, I guess.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. We have 4.5 to 5 lakh people each year losing their life because of traumatic injury. We have nearly 20 lakh people who are left seriously injured or permanently disabled because of these injuries. So we're talking about 20 to 25 lakh people in India every year getting drastically affected because of traumatic injury. If you look at young people in India, the number one cause of death for young people in India today is road crashes. It's a form of injury. So if we are losing our productive populations to this sort of an issue, and the Niti Aayog, AIMS, Law Commission have all verified that 30 to 50% of these lives can be saved just with effective emergency response to trauma care. There's a huge opportunity that we are sitting on in terms of saving lives, and in fact, not doing it would be injustice to the country. So those are the numbers that we are talking about in terms of what the impact of this judgment will be, and these are annual numbers. These are not aggregated multi-year numbers. We're talking about in a single year, 4.5 to 5 lakh people dying because of injury. So the idea is that if many of the existing systems, without spending too much money, if they're just better connected, if they're just better deployed, if the existing technologies, data science is used, there is no reason why we can't guarantee many of these things to our citizens. So the challenge has been that while many of these things they've existed in silos, and many of the departments that own these different services don't oftentimes talk to each other or are willing to devolve their powers to facilitate integration. Now they'll be forced to, because now a health ministry will have to coordinate with the police, will have to coordinate with fire, and vice versa, and they will have to figure out extrication. Oftentimes, we see that lives are lost because they're just stuck in that situation for a very long period of time, and so extrication will now finally become will become part of the chain that we're talking about. People are taken to wrong.
You're so right, because very often, one has been witness to accidents or other situations where the ambulance, the person who's manning the ambulance is actually expected to extricate the person, and they do not seem to always have the expertise to do that, and seem to cause more injury to the person already in trauma.
Absolutely, not just that. Where is the hospital? Where is the ambulance taking the person? We know of a very famous crash that happened, infamous rather, where a very well-known person was killed outside of Mumbai a few years ago. He was first taken to a PHC with open brain trauma. So the where is the competence in the system, right? You can't have people being taken to a primary health center with life-threatening injuries. So for that, you need to designate hospitals that can handle different kinds of trauma. So there is a whole science behind it, but that science is not new. It has existed for 30 years. But the point now is to put that in practice and make sure that if we need help, not only do we get help on the scene, but we are also taken to the right place so the life can be saved. So that's the vision with which we filed this petition overall.
So you were also talking about ambulances getting GPS in terms of being able to track, and will there be an AI system, so to speak, which may be able to direct them to the nearest centers, the appropriate center, if it's a tertiary care or a super tertiary care?
You know, we don't need very sophisticated systems for this. What we need is a very clean mapping of every district where we know what facility exists where. And it's as simple as having a chart that if there is a head injury, take the person to here. These are the options and so on and so. Of course, all of this can be automated. There are a plethora of apps that already exist in this area. The government itself might be able to build systems that are easy to do. You can definitely use AI to optimize where ambulances are placed. Because right now, once they are placed in a particular location, they stay there for their entire lifetime. The idea is that the injury patterns are changing from season to season, from month to month, from week to week, and depending upon the time of the day. So you need to be able to optimize the placement of ambulances effectively, and of course, technology has a role to play in all of that. But we have to start with the basics first. Who is manning these ambulances? Do they even know how to check for pulse? Forget about providing intubation or life-saving treatment. That's the first test that I ask everyone to do. If you see a public ambulance, ask them if they know how to check for pulse. And in many cases, you'll be surprised, the kind of answers you will get. So we wanted to bring competence into the system, and what the court has now said is that the staff in every ambulance has to be certified under a specific, paramedical certification. So even a doctor is not good enough because doctors are trained to handle in hospital scenarios, not the unpredictability of on-site issues, not the unpredictability of hygiene issues. So you need to be able to ensure that even if you have an MBBS or a BAMS, BUMS doctor that is manning an ambulance, they are also certified in ATLS and PHTLS and so on and so forth, so that they know how to handle pre-hospital injuries because they have only been trained in hospital stuff. So all those intricacies were earlier getting missed out and were not being spoken about, and that's what we wanted to bring to the fore. That simply saying that something exists doesn't mean that it has a competency to save lives.
So you're talking about not just public ambulances, but bringing private ambulances also in this ambit. One has also seen cases where the ambulance would come and then they say, this is not our jurisdiction. We have to operate elsewhere. Will all those kind of issues also be addressed by bringing this more intelligent system of more coordinated working?
The good thing about this judgment is that it is being monitored by the Honorable Supreme Court, which means that many of the operational issues, if they exist, or if the jurisdictional issue that you, for example, mentioned, they will be brought to the fore and will be addressed, by the appropriate systems. Ideally, if an ambulance has arrived somewhere, then you don't expect them to say no to an injured person. That should be that's again what I mean when I talk about unification of the system, right? One country, one system. But of course, there are operational challenges, and I do believe that because this issue has now come to the fore, the administration as well as the judiciary will work together to iron out some of these things.
The other issues of bystanders or of good Samaritans, and I do understand that you are the person who helped us bring in the earlier law so that people don't get scared away from either helping or reaching out and getting them to some victim to the healthcare center. These days, we also see cases of people actually maybe using their cell phones to create viral videos instead of going ahead and helping. Is there something that now I know that it takes the Good Samaritan law a little forward. Tell us what it tells about these kind of situations as well, where increasingly we find they become spectators who want to capture it on their cell phones rather than be of help in an emergency situation.
Sure. I want to clarify a couple of things before I go to the judgment and what it speaks about the Good Samaritan law. I want to clarify that you will of course see in the crowd of people, many people holding out of their cameras, right? But there are also equal number of people, maybe 50% of other people who are not holding up their cameras, who are perhaps there trying to offer water, trying to throw water at the victim so they stay awake, trying to scramble. I mean, there's a lot of confusion in these scenes oftentimes, right? So people are screaming. There's all sorts of things happening. Our target is those people. Our target is not people who are making videos. There will always be enough people in the country who will not want to step forward, but there are also enough number of people who want to step forward to help. Every time there is a train crash, entire villages pour to help people. Every time there has been a bomb blast in the country, people have rushed towards the scene and not away from the scene to help people and take them into PCR vans. So I definitely want to clarify that there are enough number of people who want to help, and those are the people that we're targeting through the Good Samaritan law. Now, in 2016, when the Supreme Court, in our case, instituted the Good Samaritan law, the Honorable Supreme Court had clearly stated that every state will need to have a nodal authority that will be the owner of this particular law. Then in 2019, the Honorable Parliament of India passed the Good Samaritan law under the Motor Vehicle Act. When that law was passed in the Motor Vehicle Act, the aspect of grievance redressal was unfortunately left out, where you recognize that people have to be safe, but if those people are still harassed, who do they go to? They can't come to the parliament, or they can't keep going to the Supreme Court. So that grievance redressal mechanism was missing. So what the government did was to encourage people. They launched a number of schemes for payouts and so on and so forth. But people were still not helping because the confidence that you will not be harassed and that fear of harassment goes way beyond any monetary benefit that you can get. So that genuine fear that was that existed because of the historical way in which Good Samaritans were treated from the time of the British actually is what we were trying to solve. So now in this order, the Honorable Supreme Court has established a grievance redressal mechanism in every district, and a portal has to be created by each DM or collector, or in their existing DRSC portals, they have to file a status report on a frequent basis where they report such cases where harassment was reported and how that grievance was handled. So there is a mechanism now that's been put into place. Again, states will have to file compliance in the next few months, so we'll know exactly what work has happened in it. But realistically, I suspect that it will take about a year and a half, 2 years for this to go into all 780 districts in India and be fully functional.
You spoke about common citizens coming forward to help. Uh, the order also speaks about specific training, isn't it? For people, like you mentioned, doctors are meant to do a particular thing. They are not meant to handle that particular case in situ, in the place where the accident per se has happened. Um, that training is something one is giving to what? Their paramedical staff, or it could be citizen volunteers as well. What is the plan for training in case of trauma? Because obviously this is happening everywhere, and therefore you would require personnel in big numbers. And what is the kind of position that exists now? Do we have enough people trained to know what to do in such situations?
So in low resource settings like India, it is beneficial to have the population trained in what is called basic life support skills, where basic trauma can be handled. We, of course, cannot expect people to be transporting victims, to be providing surgical care, and so on and so forth. That is squarely the job of the government, and our aim has been to get the system to operate rather than to put the onus on the public. It won't be right to put the onus on the citizens for their own emergency care. That's not the job of the citizens. But what the Honorable Court has said is that we need to democratize, we need to make popular the basic trauma life support training so that people are trained to do the basic things, which is C-spine immobilization, which is not to move their neck with a jerk, to control bleeding if somebody is bleeding profusely, which is primarily by applying pressure on the wound, CPR, and handling some other situations like electrical shocks, snake bites, and so on and so forth. There are common occurrences in our country. That would be a good thing to do. And while the court has not spelled out exactly how that has to be done, that has been left on to the governments to figure out. But our recommendation to the governments has been to establish a simple curriculum that can be delivered in schools, colleges, and offices, and do it in a mission mode so that larger number of people are trained in these skills, and find master trainers within that setup so that people who've been trained once can go on and train train others, because these are not very difficult skills. We've even trained tribal populations in India on some of these skills, and they perform exceptionally well in many of these scenarios. But the fundamental role of a good Samaritan or a bystander is not to provide medical care. It is to invoke the system. Even if you have $1 billion ambulance service, it is of no use. It will be sitting and rotting if the people who have to call them don't call them out of fear. So that's where the role of the bystander or the Good Samaritan starts, which is by making that phone call. If you have done that, you have done your job. The onus of saving their life is not on you, it's on the system. The Constitution is not putting the onus on you, it is putting the onus of preservation of life on the government. And it is their job to ensure that. And they can't put that onus on the citizens to play. So citizens have to make that phone call. If they are trained to help, they can provide additional help. If they provide either of these two things, they cannot be harassed, they cannot be questioned by the system, they cannot be brought to the court, and so on and so forth. That's what the Good Samaritan law does. But that's their role, and we can't put more onus on them than these few things. Words of comfort. That's the other thing you can do, right? If somebody is, most people after suffering an injury die because of shock, because of panic, because of stress, and that's what leads to excessive failure of organs, excessive bleeding, and so on and so forth. So words of comfort, providing warmth, physical warmth, which is covering a person who's bleeding with a blanket because their body is going to hypothermia because blood flow is taking away the heat from the body. These are basic things that you can do to support an injured person, and that's what the court is encouraging the states to enable through mass trainings for the citizens.
The court also talks about trauma registries, which I presume are some kind of the procedure from the time that the accident happens, from the site to the victim being shifted to the hospital, what treatment they receive, and the outcome as well. Uh, I do know that, for instance, in Tamil Nadu, when they started doing the maternal death audits, that's where they were able to find out where really the gaps are. Is that the idea behind asking all these states to do this as part of the entire protocol, and how is it going to help us?
The biggest way it will help is, let me give you an example of road crashes. Now, in road crashes, we know that 180,000 people are killed, and about 500,000 people are seriously injured or permanently disabled because of these incidents. The cause of death is recorded in the postmortem reports. The cause of injury is lying in individual hospitals somewhere in the country. So today, while we know that road crashes have caused X number of deaths, we don't know how many spinal injuries exist, how many brain trauma exists, how many people lost their limbs. We have no clue about that. And because we have no clue about that, the science of road safety has not evolved in the last 2-3 decades in our country. Any public health, person who works in road safety, you go and talk to, they'll harp about helmets. We have investigated crashes where two-wheelers are hitting two-wheelers at high speed, causing injuries to lower limbs of the body, and both people wearing helmets have died in those incidents. Where is the innovation? Where is the science? Where is the medical treatment? Where are the protocols for that? So that because the information doesn't exist, we have been decades behind in trying to solve the injury problem. We've only been looking at death problem. Now, every time you reduce death, that death is converting into an injury because you are saving someone from dying, but that is getting translated into an injury or is being recorded as an injury. But we have zero visibility nationally as to what those nature of injuries are, and therefore what action has to be taken. Why should we not push the auto industry to innovate that the lower limb of the body is not injured? We have no data right now. I can't even say that's required. I have no data on spinal injuries. I have no data on blood loss. So that's something that the trauma registry will do. So it's a problem solving system. It is not just a research and recording system. If you get the data, you'll use that data to solve the problem and not just do research on it.
You spoke about training that you would advocate because of the kind of few resources that we have, or we are working with fewer resources than would be required for handling the kind of scale of accidents that we have. Uh, The order talks about emergency medical technicians. So, will there be a separate cadre that will be developed, or are the paramedical staff as well as the doctors expected to undergo that also as part of the curriculum? That is something that should be integrated into their curriculum.
I think this question also highlights the existing challenge in our system with regard to nomenclature. Typically, if you go to any developed country, if you go to any evolved trauma system, you will see that doctors is a terminology used for people inside hospitals. And for outside hospitals, people providing care are split into two parts: EMTs and paramedics. EMTs are typically a lower grade technician, and a paramedic is a higher grade technician, where they are trained in different things in order to save lives. The what the kind of training that is required to save a life in an external environment, in a non-hospital environment, is a very specialized training. It's not rocket science again, but it is a specialized training. It's not something that you and I can do unless we are trained in it. So, regardless of whether you are called an EMT or a paramedic or a doctor, if you are operating in an ambulance or if you are operating in an outside of hospital environment, you need to be certified in that specific skill. And what the court is talking about is using EMT as a synonym for anybody who mans an ambulance, to say that they have to be certified in this specific skill. Because if somebody has to make a hole here in my neck to put a tube in, I will not allow anyone who's not trained to do that. But if a person who's trained, they are the ones who can do that. Same thing with, the country is obsessed with ALS ambulances. Let's deploy an ALS ambulance everywhere, which is an advanced life support. Even citizens are saying we want advanced life support ambulances. Advanced life support ambulance has a ventilator. To operate the ventilator, you require specialized training. It is not like an oxygen cylinder where you just put something on the nose and the job is done. Ventilator requires access to the lungs. So if the person is not trained, how are they going to be able to do that? So we need trained personnel in our ambulances. It's a great opportunity for the government to generate employment, because there is a massive need and demand for ambulances, and this is a great opportunity. It's a high paying job. It's a para skill job, and in many countries, paramedics eventually go on to become doctors, to a higher grade of service, to surgeons and so on and so forth. So it can be a great path to improve healthcare overall in the country if this is taken as a skill and an employment challenge and addressed through this certification process. And of course, it will save lives and ensure competent care, which at this point is determined by how lucky you are in terms of what kind of an ambulance is around.
It's all very reassuring to say that now it's your constitutional right to get timely trauma care. But what about a citizen who is denied that or is not able to get? Is there a grievance mechanism for that? Or if he is not able to pay, for instance, the court order also talks about any provisions for a person who does not have the ability to pay and yet requires trauma care.
So thankfully, the Honorable Prime Minister launched the PM Rahat scheme a few months ago. It's called PM Rahat, stands for Prime Minister's Road Accident Hospitalization and Treatment Scheme. And under that scheme, at least a third of traumatic injury today, which is of road crashes, is guaranteed up to 1.5 lakhs worth of treatment, which is life-saving treatment in the first 7 days of the injury suffered. It's a good amount of money, and it's a good amount of period to be able to get the right care. The rollout is a challenge right now. We are seeing some challenges coming up, but we are also seeing officers working to resolve some of those challenges that are appearing. In case of denial, it is treated as the denial of any other fundamental right today, which means that when the family is filing for compensation, when the people are going to consumer court, when the people are going to regular courts, because all injury cases, unfortunately or fortunately, are become legal cases because they have a medico legal angle involved attached with it. So there is adjudication that is already happening. And if there is denial of service, then that is a denial of fundamental right, and that can be dealt right at the level of the lowermost courts and can go up to the highermost courts. And the fundamental responsibility in terms of the governance system lies with the district administration to deliver that right to your rights to you, because all basic essential services are delivered at the district level. They're not delivered at a state or a national level. So the district administration, the district collector, the superintendent of police, the chief medical officer, they are the ones who are the custodian of this right that has been made available to the citizens. And so the grievance redressal mechanisms that already exist in those offices are the ones that have to be invoked if there's denial. But as far as the medical treatment piece is concerned, the PM Rahat scheme addresses it. The Ayush scheme also addresses some aspects of it. We understand that once the 7-day period is over and the 1.5 lakh rupees period is over, and the person comes from a background where they need continuing care, then they can be transferred to Ayush Bharat scheme. That can also happen, within the system. Again, like I said, all of these things, in my view, personal view, will take a few years for to get fully rolled out. Just because the judgment came on 26th of May doesn't mean that in a few months this will be rolled out. I think many of the states are still wrapping their head around what this would require, and some of the states have directly approached us, and we are assisting them in figuring this out. But there is it will take some time. But my hope is that what we have done with polio or HIV in terms of an orchestrated response, traumatic injury will get a similar orchestrated response as other public health challenges have received in our country.
Thank you, Piyush. That kind of at least explains the judgment to us, and hopefully, many of your viewers will be able to use it in situations where they may need to avail of many of these services as well. Like you said, it could take a little while. But just one final clarification: whether it is for a Ayushman or whether it is for a PM Rahat, do Indian citizens or any citizen need to kind of enlist themselves for these, or does it automatically flow because the incident has happened in India?
PM Rahat scheme doesn't apply to Indians alone. Even a foreign citizen who's injured in India will be eligible under the PM Rahat scheme. You don't have to sign up. You don't need a card. The only thing that is required is for the local police within 24 to 48 hours verify that this is indeed a road crash case and not any other traumatic injury case. If it is any other traumatic injury case, then it would fall under Ayush or other insurance schemes. Many states have their own schemes that they are running for some of these things. But as far as the PM Rahat scheme is concerned, it does not require any registration. It does not discriminate in terms of nationality as well. Anybody in the boundary of India, and it's also not pertaining to just national highways or union roads. Any road in the country, any road crash victim can avail of the PM Rahat scheme.
Thank you so much, Piyush, for enlightening us on this kind of an unified emergency response system that we hope will be in place in the country sooner rather than later. Thank you for joining us on DeKoder.
Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.